We were just trying to have a peaceful weekend away, family, food, and fresh air at our lake cabin. It was supposed to be simple. We'd packed up the kids, the grill, and enough burgers to feed a small army. My uncle even brought his famous smoked ribs, which is always a big deal. The lake was calm, the sun was out, and the smell of charcoal and laughter filled the air. We were finally unwinding until she showed up. She came marching across the gravel path like she owned the whole mountain. We didn't even know there was a homeowners association out here, let alone that one of its board members lived next door. But this woman Karen, as we came to know her, had other plans for our weekend. At first, it was just passive-aggressive remarks. "Noise travels far up here," she said with a tight smile. Then it was threats about permits and fire hazards. We tried to ignore her. We even turned the music down just to keep the peace. But ignoring her only made things worse. She stormed off, muttering something about calling the proper authorities. We thought that meant the sheriff at most. Instead, 10 minutes later, we heard sirens, multiple sirens. That alone was weird for a remote area like this. But what happened next was beyond anything we could have imagined. Not only did she call, but she claimed we were a domestic threat. Because of the size of our group, and get this, the way we were handling propane. Yeah, we laughed at first too. But when black SUVs pulled up and men in tactical gear stepped out, our laughter stopped cold. One of them walked straight toward me and asked for my name. The others were already talking into radios, eyeing the cabin. My youngest son clung to my leg, asking what was going on. I didn't have an answer. That's when I realized this wasn't just a nosy neighbor or a bad weekend. It was about to become something way bigger than any of us were ready for. I tried to stay calm, but my hands were shaking. I mean, how do you stay calm when guys with Homeland Security badges are standing in your yard, looking like they're about to raid something? One of them asked if we had any weapons. I told him no, we had a couple of fishing rods and a barbecue fork. Cousin laughed nervously. Nobody else did. They weren't here for a friendly chat. Meanwhile, Karen was standing off to the side with her phone still in her hand, acting like she'd just saved the entire neighborhood. She had that smug look, like she was expecting a medal. I could hear her whispering something to one of the officers. Whatever she said, it made him radio for backup. Backup. For a family cookout at a lakeside cabin. While they were questioning us, my wife tried to calm the kids, but even they could tell something wasn't right. We weren't being treated like people who forgot to turn down the music. We were being treated like suspects. The guy in charge, Agent something, I never caught his full name, asked if we'd been lighting fireworks, storing large amounts of propane, or constructing anything suspicious. Constructing. We had a foldable table and a cooler full of soda. That's when my uncle pulled me aside and whispered, "I think this has something to do with last summer." Now that caught me off guard. What did last summer have to do with this? We hadn't even been at this cabin in over a year. My uncle wouldn't say more, just gave me that look that meant not here, not now. But I could see something was bothering him. And the more I thought about it, the more I started to wonder. If Karen knew more than she was letting on, she wasn't just a cranky neighbor, she knew something. And she was trying real hard to make sure the right people showed up at that point. The officers told us we couldn't go back inside the cabin until they'd done a full inspection. That's when I noticed one of them heading toward the tool shed, where my dad kept a few old boxes we'd never opened. The tool shed had always been kind of a mystery. It belonged to my late grandfather, and after he passed, nobody really touched it. We figured it was full of rusty nails, fishing gear, maybe some old chainsaws, nothing worth digging through. But now, seeing a federal agent walking straight toward it, flashlight already out, made my stomach drop. Something told me this wasn't about propane anymore. Karen was still lingering close. talking to another agent now, flipping through something on her phone. I overheard bits and pieces, years of complaints, unregistered gatherings, suspicious family activity. She sounded like she'd been building a case against us for months, maybe longer. It didn't make any sense. We weren't even here most of the year. This place was our escape, not some kind of secret operation. Meanwhile, my uncle was pacing. Near the lake, I followed him, pressing for answers. He finally gave in, lowering his voice. Back in the 80s, your granddad worked for a defense contractor. Real hush-hush stuff. After he retired, there were rumors he kept copies documents. Maybe some experimental parts. Homeland showed up once before. Way before your time. I just stared at him. So, you think they're looking for something he left behind? I don't know, he said. But Karen, Sposa wasn't always just some HOA busybody. Her ex-husband used to be in intelligence. That's not gossips in the old local court. Filings that made my skin crawl. This wasn't about noise complaints or grilling. This was personal or political. Or both. Back at the cabin, the agents were now stringing yellow tape around the yard. One of them pulled my dad aside and started asking about specific names I'd never heard before. My dad looked confused, but something in his eyes told me he recognized at least one. Then, out of nowhere, one of the officers stepped out of the shed holding something wrapped in canvas. It looked heavy. Everyone went quiet. Karen smiled like she'd just won something. And that's when a second black SUV pulled up. But this one didn't have Homeland Security plates. The second SUV rolled in slow, like it wasn't in any hurry but. The air shifted the second it stopped. The agents from Homeland Security stopped what they were doing and stood a little straighter. One of them even lowered his radio and stepped back. Whoever was in that vehicle wasn't here to ask questions, they were here to take control. The doors opened and two men stepped out. No uniforms, no badges, just plain black suits and earpieces. The way they moved, quiet but direct, gave off the kind of vibe you see in spy movies. One of them walked straight over to the agent, holding the canvas-wrapped item. He didn't say a word. Just looked at it, nodded once, and motioned for it to be loaded into the back of the SUV. My uncle and I exchanged a glance. Something was seriously off. Karen didn't look as smug now. In fact, she backed away a little and stopped talking altogether. That's when I started to think maybe she had stirred up something she didn't fully understand. Maybe this wasn't even about us anymore. The man in the black suit turned to my dad. "You're the property owner." My dad nodded. "Then you're going to need to come with us for questioning." The way he said it wasn't a request. We all started talking at once. My mom was asking what this was about. My uncle tried to step in, and the kids were getting scared. The tension was boiling over. My dad looked at me and mouthed, "Stay calm." He didn't even hesitate before following them to the SUV. One of the Homeland agents stayed behind and started collecting everyone's IDs. "Until further notice, no one leaves the property," he said flatly. "This area is under federal observation." He set up a portable satellite unit right in our driveway. That's when my cousin, who'd been quiet most of the time, pointed toward the trees. "Hey, there's someone else out there." We turned. Through the tree line, just barely visible, was a man in camouflage watching us with binoculars. He wasn't with the feds, and he wasn't alone. The man in the woods wasn't moving, just standing there, half hidden behind a tree, binoculars locked on our cabin. Then we saw the second, one farther up the hill, crouched low with what looked like a long-range camera. They weren't part of Homeland Security. They didn't wear uniforms, and they definitely weren't neighbors. One of the agents noticed them too and immediately called it in. Within seconds, two of the tactical guys broke off and headed into the woods, weapons lowered but ready. The man with the binoculars disappeared like he'd practiced it 100 times. Silent, fast. The other crouched figure vanished right behind him. Just gone. Now everyone was on edge. One of the suits turned back from the SUV and started issuing orders. Get aerial support. Scan the ridge. I want heat signatures and movement tracking now. Another agent shouted for everyone to stay inside, but no one moved. We were frozen, confused, watching our quiet family weekend spiral into something that felt like a covert operation. Then came the second twist. My cousin pulled out his phone and started scrolling through local news alerts. Guys, look at it. He held up a post from just 2 hours earlier. It was a grainy photo of our cabin taken from the same angle as the man in the woods end tagged with some conspiracy blog's watermark. The headline read, "Possible safe house linked. 2 retired defense asset confirmed by source near lakefront property." The comments were full of wild theories about hidden documents, government tracking, and off-grid weapons caches. Karen's name popped up in the thread. She'd posted something earlier that morning. It's a suspicious activity near my lot again. Same family might finally have proof. It was her. She tipped them off, not just the feds, but some online fringe group too. That's when the power cut out. The agents scrambled, yelling into radios. The lights from the portable units flickered. Our phones lost signal. For the first time, one of the agents looked genuinely worried. "We W.